Welcome to the Hobby School podcast. Whether you're a seasoned hobbyist or just getting started, Hobby School is the perfect place to learn something new. My name is Dr. Destiny Kopp, and I'm your host of the podcast. But before we jump into our episode for today, the only thing I ask is that if you enjoyed the episode, please share with a friend and give us an honest review on your favorite podcast platform. This helps us get out the content to more people. I also want to invite you to get on our wait list for our next Hobby School Online Learning Summit. These are free to attend, and you can find the link to join at hobbyschool.com, which is also in our podcast show notes. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. And my special guest today is Karen Creel. Karen is a certified garden coach with over 30 years growing backyard vegetable gardens. And today we're going to be talking about how anyone can grow a backyard vegetable garden. And Karen, thank you so much for joining me. I'm very excited in this topic myself. I've actually dabbled in a backyard vegetable garden that quite frankly didn't go as well as I expected. So I'm sure I did a lot of things wrong. But before we get started in the questions that I have for you today, can you tell the good audience a little bit more about you and how you help people?
Yes, my name is Karen Creel. I live in Chickamauga, Georgia. I recently retired last year from 42 years of nursing, but I have always, for as long as I can remember, I have had a backyard garden. I've had row gardens. In fact, with a friend of mine, we did a community-supported agriculture garden where we provided fresh vegetables to 7 different families. And I'll be honest, I'll never do that again. That was a lot of hard work. But in the last few years, I have started gardening in raised beds. And that's really what I enjoy the most. You have a lot of control over a raised bed.
So when you were talking about row gardens, and this shows you a little bit more about my ignorance here, I'm thinking of, going out on a farm and there's like these rows and rows and rows of, corn or whatever they're growing. And that seems like a lot of work to me.
Well, and actually for the backyard garden, it just means, because we didn't have like a huge garden, but it requires, bringing in a tiller. Ours was small, but you till the garden and then you just have nice, neat rows of vegetables. And one of the things that I have found and has been supported, in all the literature, is tilling is really not good for your garden. It disrupts all of I like to call it the garden city underneath your soil. You have bacteria and fungi and worms and beetles and spiders, all the things that we kind of consider yucky, but they're not. They're very important to how well our garden does. And that's one of the reasons I have chosen to do raised beds is, once you get your soil, a good soil in there, there's no more tilling. Also, there's lots less weeding, because when you do a row garden, if you don't really like plant something in between it or put lots and lots of mulch, you spend most of your time weeding, especially like the way it is now here. For July, where I live, it's raining right now, and we have just had rain after rain. And so it's almost impossible to keep up with the weeding. So the raised bed gardens eliminate that. It also allows you to plant closer. I do what's called intensive planting. It's kind of a square foot garden method where just about every space in that bed is covered. That cuts down on weeds. Also, it keeps the soil covered, keeps the soil moist. There's less watering. So that's why when I talk about anybody can grow a backyard garden, you really can. You don't have to have a lot of space. And one of the things that I promote is just a few simple steps to grow your garden. Like, I retired last September. But that doesn't mean when you retire, you're not busy. I have, started my business, and also I teach gardening classes. I teach a couple of nonprofits gardening classes once a month. So I don't want to spend all my time in my garden. And a lot of families have young children, they're working, and they can't put a lot of time in their garden. So my philosophy is you want to enjoy your garden. I think it's, to me, I kind of count it as a Zen moment. It's my meditation time sometimes when I go in my garden, because I'm not thinking of anything else. But, you want it to be fun. You want it to be relaxing. You don't want it to become a chore. So what I teach in my gardening classes is, like I said, just a few simple steps. And those steps will help keep weeds down. They'll have you start out with healthy plants. Of course, I grow organically. So that is another way to have a healthy garden. And when you have a healthy garden, you don't have a lot of pests. You have, good plants that produce good vegetables. And then my other philosophy is I don't use a lot of fertilizer. I find that you don't need it if you start out with a good, healthy garden. And the other thing I also do, and I really started this last year, it's not been a practice that I've done for a long time, but I do a lot of companion planting, plant lots of flowers for the pollinators, lots of herbs and flowers to attract beneficial insects. That way you have nature doing your pest control for you. So you're not out there fighting bugs on your garden if you will, just apply a few simple steps.
Well, you definitely have sold me on that, of doing a raised bed. I think when I had tried this before, it definitely wasn't a raised bed. I didn't even know anything about them. So let me ask you this. Let's assume, you can use me as your guinea pig here because I don't know anything about this. Assume that I do want to get started. What are the steps, or what do I need to do next? I want to, grow some vegetables, and you can tell us what would be the perfect kind to grow in something like this. Grow some vegetables and just, really dip my toes into a raised bed garden. Where would I start, and what are the steps to go through that?
One of the first things, I also design raised bed gardens. So one of the things I tell people, I just recently designed one for a nonprofit. And, their purpose was not to feed their whole residents it's alcohol and drug rehabilitation. So their goal was not to provide all of the food for that. And that's one of the things I encourage them, because when you are first starting out, and I would tell you, Destiny, to start small, but dream big. Because if you do too much, if you go out there with the vision that you're going to feed a family of 4, that you're going to be able to feed your family all winter, you're going to be disappointed. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to start small. There's many ways you can create a raised bed. My beds are made out of treated lumber, but there are steel beds that you can make. At one of the nonprofits that I do a weekly garden class, it's a community garden, and theirs are actually made out of cinder blocks, just cement blocks. So you can build it out of anything that you want. I wouldn't, people build them out of pallets. I wouldn't grow them, make them out of like the old railroad ties that you still see on the side of the road, because those are treated with some pretty ugly chemicals. So, I wouldn't do that. But generally, you can make a raised bed. You can have pretty brick raised beds. So my recommendation is you don't want to make your beds, for me, any longer than 6 feet. Anything after 6 feet, especially if you're using boards, they may have a tendency, the weight of the soil, to make them bow out. Plus, I just think they look nicer and they're more manageable. My beds are all 4 by 6, which they're 4 foot wide. and they're 6 foot long. You want to limit the width to 4 foot wide because, as you know, your arms can only stretch about 2 feet. So you don't want to have to climb into your bed to work. This way you can, reach 2 feet all around. And then my other recommendation is you want to make it anywhere from 18 inches to 2 foot high. Mine are 18 inches right now. And the reason for that is if you're going to grow herbs, or you're going to just grow like maybe a spring or fall garden that has lettuce and spinach and things like that in it, you don't need a deep bed. But all of your summer vegetables, your tomatoes, your eggplants, your peppers, all of those things need a good deep root system. So don't make it wider than 4 foot wide. Have it about 18 inches to 2 foot. You need to have a good soil. One of the things I purchase in mine is one of my local nurseries has something called a planter's mix, which is a mix of topsoil and some compost. If you don't want, if your area doesn't have like a planter's mix, one of the things that you can do is you can create your own. You can go and you can get topsoil, compost, and then you want to add some sand. And I usually do that. I tell my clients to do a third of topsoil, a third of sand. And it's not the sand like you get to make the play boxes for your kids. It's called a builder's sand, and it's much more coarse. And then the third thing you want to do is a compost. And of course, you're going to have some space left over, but that's where I add things like when I plant, like I may put worm compost in the hole or something like that. But you can make your own mix. When you do the topsoil and the compost in the sand, you have a good draining soil, and that's exactly what you want. The other thing is with a 4x6 bed, you have 4 times 6. This is how you figure it. 4 times 6 is 24. So if you divide that into squares, you have 24 squares to plant in. You can have all the spinach and lettuce and carrots, all the small things for a spring garden for your whole family. That's plenty of room. You want to add a second bed, most likely, for your summer vegetables, because you still have those same 24 squares to plant in, but a tomato takes like 2 of those squares, or sometimes almost 3 of those squares. A big squash plant put in the front of your garden is going to take about 3 of those squares because they get so big, and then you'll allow those to trail over. One of the things I did this year is between my 2 beds, I added an arch. And then that arch has netting over it. And I grew my cucumbers up the arch. So you can really increase your garden space by adding trellises. In one of my garden beds, when I grow sugar snap peas, I have a trellis, and they grow up that, and that gives me plenty of room in the front and plenty of room in the back to plant something else. And then the other thing that I recommend for a successful garden is to add flowers and herbs to your garden. My garden had zinnias in one corner this year, and it drew in the pollinators, and the pollinators went to my cucumber and squash flowers and pollinated it. For something like tomatoes, I added basil, because basil will make your tomatoes taste better, and they also ward off some tomato hornworms. The other thing I did is I planted a kind of a little known herb. Not everyone grows it. When you think of herbs, you think of oregano and marjoram and chives and that sort of thing, but it's called borage, B-O-R-A-G-E. Has beautiful blue flowers, but it is a great companion plant for tomatoes because it does repel tomato hornworms. And I'll be honest, I saw one hornworm this year. That's it. And I picked it off and it was gone. And that's one of the things that I encourage people. When you're garden organically, you're going to have a little bit of a loss. You're going to have a few leaves with holes in them. When you see this perfect fruit in the grocery store, it's all been sprayed. They've kept every bug away from it. But when you spray to keep the bad bugs away, you kill the good bugs too. It's indiscriminatory. It doesn't know the difference. So if you plant things to bring in bad bugs, like I did this year, those bad bugs will fight your battle for you. And I started that practice really in earnest last year. And the only thing that I have had in my garden this year, and it's again almost inevitable, is some squash bugs. And that's really about all that I've seen this year.
Well, all of that just sounds super simple to me. Getting the lumber, getting the planters mix, and even kind of doing it on your own if you want. And then, kind of figuring out what vegetables or herbs and stuff that you're going to plant. And that's another question I have is, how do you figure out what to plant in your raised bed? I have a blog, and I can't think exactly what the blog post is, but also I have an online garden course. And one of the things that I include in that is a plant size chart. So for example, if I have 6 foot long bed, if I have a 6 foot long bed and I'm going to put tomatoes in that, I'm going to put a tomato at the back of that bed, and it's going to take up 3 of those square feet. So I know that my big plants, my tomatoes, my peppers, all of those things are going to go at the north end of my bed. Anything tall, any trellis, they are placed at the north end of your bed, because anything behind it will be blocked from the sun. So I put my tomatoes at the north end of that bed. I put 2 tomato plants, and then I start looking, what can I put in front of that bed? So then I start looking at, okay, what are the medium-sized plants? And some of the medium-sized plants in the summer may be a little banana pepper. So a banana pepper, I have 12 squares, so I can put 3 banana peppers. Those are going to go in it. Okay, I need something short now to go in front of those plants. So what can I plant that's short? Well, you don't think of a squash plant as short, but it really is. It's wide. So you could put 2 squash plants in front of it. So at the back, you have tomatoes, the tall plants. In the middle, I could also have some basil there to go with my tomatoes. And you want to put something shorter. And in this list of plants, when I give you the plant heights, I give them as large, medium, and small. Other small things are things like, now these are summer vegetables. So remember, I live in the hot South. So in the summer, I can't put little lettuce leaves, which are very small, because it's too hot for those. Those are cool season. But I can put things like the little green onions that, we love to pick and just eat them while they're small. I can pop some flowers in there. In one corner, I may have some chives. So that's how you plan your garden. And I do, again, on one of my blog posts, I do a garden plan. And that's one of the things my business actually does is I say, what do you want to plant in your garden? And then I plan the bed for you. And that's one of the things I do with my one-on-one coaching and also in my local gardening classes. We have a class in February or maybe March where we actually draw out our plan on graph paper. And we say, okay, we want lettuce here. So this is a spring garden. So all of that lettuce will go in the front. And my big plant
for that bed in the spring would be my sugar snap peas on the trellis. And that trellis would be at the north end of that bed. So I guess that's how you do it. You stack them. You start with the tallest, you move down to middle, then you move down to small. The other thing that I do, and I do this in my garden, is what's called succession planting. When I planted my first squash plant in May, I actually purchased 2 plants. So after that got started good and it started to flower, in another one of my beds, I planted two hills. You plant squash in hills, 2 hills of squash. So now that my first squash plant has given me all the squash it's going to give me, it's beginning to look a little rough after the hot weather. My second squash plant now is producing. So that's how you keep a succession of plants. So I always encourage everyone to have at least 2 beds. That way you can, you may not have much growing in one bed, or you may just have, some plants, but it gives you an opportunity when you take out that lettuce from the spring, because now it's bolted, the weather's gotten hot. You take your lettuce out, you amend it with some compost, and you do your second planting of either cucumbers or squash, or I'm always poking in little green onions because we really like those. I also encourage people, when they decide they're going to plant a tomato, to go to the nursery and look at the tags on the plant and notice that one of those tomato plants may not give you any tomatoes for 90 days. That's a long time to wait on a tomato plant. But little salad tomatoes will give you tomatoes in 60 days. So I've been eating salad tomatoes for quite a while before I think I planted an heirloom called Mortgage Lifter that takes forever to give you tomatoes. So that way I wasn't waiting on tomatoes for a long time. So I encourage people to plant things that come in, I guess the word would be, come in at different times. Also, I don't plant all of my lettuce at one time. I plant a couple of squares. I can put 20 lettuce seeds in 1 square foot. So I'll plant 20 lettuce seeds in 2 of those squares, and I'll leave 2 squares blank. And then in about 10 days, I go back and plant. That way you don't have to try to eat salads every single day and then give salad away. You have a continuous crop of salad.
And that's such a great tip, and one that I've never even thought about.
Yes, that way, you don't have, how all the jokes about zucchini have people run when they see. This way, you don't have a glut of things. Just like that, I don't do zucchini, but I do yellow squash. So this way, I'm through with one plant, but my other is just starting. In fact, I went out there today, and they'll probably be ready in a couple of days. So I really didn't have a long waiting period between that time.
Well, Karen, can you tell people where they can find you, and a little bit more about, I know you have a course that they can learn more about it, and you also do some one-on-one services.
Yes, that's probably one of the things I enjoy the most. I'm currently working with a client, and this is a little new to me, but she wants to take all of the grass out of her backyard, and she wants to do kind of like a food garden back there. She wants vegetables and fruit trees and all of those things. So what we're doing, she's local, so we are working one-on-one. I have a coaching package. So I provide one-on-one services. And, that coaching package, she chose 3, but sometimes it's just, one time. And if you're out of locally where we can't meet personally, I do have an option that we can do a virtual consult. I think it's 30 minutes for like $25. You can do a lot. You just, before you schedule your meeting on my calendar, I'll send you an email and say, what would you like to get out of this consult? What do you want to talk about? And I've done lots of those, and people just come with their questions. and we knock it out in 30 minutes. The other thing I do, like I said, the one-on-one. I also do garden plans where I get your dimensions. We look at where, the sun is located, and I draw up those beds for you. The other thing I do is garden plans. You say, Karen, I want to do a summer garden. These are the vegetables I like. You tell me how many to plant and where to plant them. But I was unable, I do a lot of local gardening classes, but I really did want to reach a larger audience. So that's when I developed my online gardening course. It is for beginners. I guess you would say that's my niche. I do work a lot with beginning gardeners. And I launched that last January, and it will be relaunched again in 23, and I'm adding lots of new stuff to it. I'm very proud of it. I think it's not, it's kind of a start from scratch, nut to bolts. It's not a lot of fluff in there, but it will get you started and help you grow throughout the gardening season. The other thing with that is I do offer with that course, which is unique for me, unique for any course that I know of, you get a free 30-minute video conference from me anytime during the year or the next year, whenever you want to do it, and bring with me any problems you're having. I have you can find all of that on my website. It's called Gardenchick, www.gardenchick, GARDENCHICK.com. And on the sidebar, you can click on the online course. And I think there is a coupon there so that you can, I think you get about $50 off of that. I haven't looked at it for a while. And then if you want to look at any of my other garden services, there's a tab on my website that will say services. Again, I'm not looking at it. I almost forget. And it will take you to my calendar page. The other thing, that website is a blog. I do try to post on there monthly, and I'm really trying to increase my posting on there. I encourage everyone to sign up for my newsletter. You do that right on my website. When you sign up for when you sign up for my newsletter, you get my free 15-page ebook on inviting beneficial insects into the garden. And that'll give you lots of ideas for starting to use companion planting and flowers to attract beneficial insects. I have a private Facebook group. I have like 250 people in there, and I post in it about twice a week. And then there's several people in there that I know. I'm zone 7 in Georgia, but there's a girl who is in California, and she often pops in to give advice, especially for people who are in one of those zones where they can garden year round. I have a friend who owns an herb farm. She actually grows her own herbs. So anytime people ask about herbs, we're quick to tag Pat to answer those. But the Facebook group is called Growing, GROWING, with Gardenchick. So you can just go on facebook.com, and it would be /groups and then /growing with Gardenchick. We'd love to see you there. We have, lots of interaction. You can post anything you want to there, ask a question. I generally check it once a day, but on my phone, I kind of have a notification that says somebody has posted, and I do try to get your question answered that day. So I have all those things. I'd love to hear from people. I love gardening, and I love to share it. My goal is to get everyone to grow at least, a small part of their vegetables. I have 4 beds, so, I don't grow a whole lot. I don't put it up. I pretty much just grow seasonally and eat what is in my garden. And then when it's gone, it's gone.
Well, Karen, thank you for all of your tips today. And I know you gave us a lot of information there at the end with the website links and so on, but I will make sure that all of those links are in the show notes. So anybody who's listening, they don't have to remember to write down that
Thank
website
you.
link. They can just go to the podcast show notes or our podcast webpage and click on that and they can find you. But thank you so much for sharing all of your wonderful knowledge with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. As you can see, I like to talk about gardening.
And I like to listen. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening today. Don't forget to sign up for the wait list so you'll be the first to know when our next free HobbySchool online learning summit launches. The link is in the show notes for this episode, or you can go to hobbyschool.com, and that's HobbySchool with school without an H in it. Talk soon.